Well, it's sure good to see you here today on 10 Minutes to Refuel with Pastor Jim Diehl. I've been thinking about a couple of the heroes of the Old Testament, thinking about Joseph and about Daniel. They ended up being heroes, but it sure didn't start that way. Just real briefly told, you remember the story of Joseph sold as a slave by his own brothers. Now, that's about as bad as it gets. Taken off to godless Egypt, and there under a Pharaoh that knew nothing about God or righteous living whatsoever. And because Joseph was such a moral man and he believed in Jehovah God, of course, that ended up landing him in prison. Then the person that said he would remember Joseph and get him out of there, well, he forgot him. And there Joseph was in prison several years. I want you to remember he had done nothing wrong. There was no sin and rebellion in his life that he was being punished for. He had done everything right. And there he was. It was out of his control. How many things today are out of our control? Well, much the same is about Daniel's story, and except he was also taken captive and taken to Babylon, and it was just as godless as the other situation. And there, because Daniel believed in his Jehovah God and prayed regularly, I think you know the story, it landed him in a den of lions, the lion's den. Well, he had done nothing wrong. He had done everything right. And yet all the troubles came because he was obedient to God. It was out of his control. Well, the more I thought about it, the more applicable that is to our situation. This COVID-19 pandemic, it's out of your control. It's out of my control. If you can control it, go do it and get rid of it. But it's out of our control. About the ugly divide that is in America, where there is so much anger and bitterness from group to group, it's out of our control. We can't walk down somewhere and make a speech and cure it. It's out of our control. On and on. Taking God out of the public square, out of our public life, until you can hardly even have the Ten Commandments anywhere in any public situation, which was the solid rock foundation of America in the beginning. Well, that's out of our control. Go try to change it and you'll see it's out of our control. But here's the insight that has come. There, let's go back to Joseph in prison, sold as a slave by his brothers, forgotten. Nothing was happening. Day by day, day by day. Nothing was happening, but something was happening. That's a whole lot like us. It seems like, in many ways, nothing good is happening. It seems like it's all bad. I just want you to know, while nothing is happening, something is happening. God is still in control. And to jump to the end of that story, Joseph was brought out of prison and he was put in charge of a major part of the country. ended up being second in command behind Pharaoh, ended up being the leader of leaders except for Pharaoh. And God brought it all together later. But when nothing was happening, something was happening. God was working in the background and brought it out as it should be. I want to read that scripture to you and then we'll go on, but you probably know how the story ends, how the very brothers of Joseph ended up having to come to Egypt because that's the only place where there was food because of the terrible famine. Now Joseph was meeting the very brothers that sold him as a slave. Here's what he said. These are classic words. Genesis, the last chapter. Do not be afraid of me, but as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for the good. I'd like to change one word just for our understanding. You meant evil against me, but God turned it into good. In order that we may save the people alive. Well, my story is certainly not a major story like Joseph here in the Old Testament or Daniel or any of the others, but I had to look up it in my notes to make sure that I remembered and got it right. It was February of 2008, and I flew all the way to India for a big Nazarene convention. Oh, what were there, 400 or 500 people there, and it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There were about 3 of we folks from America that ended up there one way or the other, and we were all scheduled to speak, and then the big ordination service was Sunday, where we ordained the new ministers, and of course that was my responsibility. We were in an extremist part of India, and the police chief got a hold of the Nazarene leader there and said there will be no foreigners speaking in this city. Tell them or we'll take them to jail. Well, no, they've come all the way over here. No. And it was a big confrontation. And finally, the police chief said, okay, you can let them speak real early in the morning when nobody's there, but after some certain hour early in the morning, they had better not be on the platform or I will have the police take them to jail. Well, there I was. I was supposed to speak every day. Well, you can't. And what are we going to do about ordination? What are we going to do about the Bible college graduation? They're all here. What are we going to do? None of us that are involved in that can even talk because we were forbidden. While nothing was happening, something was happening. Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, the police came to our leader and said, you've cooperated. We appreciate it. Those foreigners have not been speaking. We're not coming tomorrow. You can do what you want to do. We're not even going to come. Have at it. Whatever their words were. They came and said, we're free tomorrow. We can have graduation. We can have the ordination. You can preach as long as you want, and all of that. And everybody responded, and the place was packed full. On Sunday morning, we had the graduation, caps and gowns and everything. Someone from headquarters in Kansas City spoke to them. Then the ordination service. I ordained 21 new pastors, not in a mass, but one by one, 21. The thing, they were singing. I had in my notes, I didn't get out of there until 1:30 p.m. It was worth the trip. What's my point? While nothing was happening, something was happening. And God was working behind the scenes, and God did it. Now I was there. I heard the police chief. I heard the anger and the determination. God worked that around until he said, do what you want. I want you to know, while nothing is happening, something is happening. God is at work. Don't give up. By the way, send this on to somebody else. They need to know that. Send it on. Send it on. Let's share it. That's the only way this gets around. God bless you. You are my church, you see. So I'm glad to have you in church here today. I'll see you next week. It sure is good to be together. Blessings, my friend.